Hey guys, Andy N, Spoken Label, back in the house on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, I've got a busy day today. Yeah, it's been started off busy. I had plans for a quiet morning. By accident, I've gone and wrapped up the second novel, but I'll talk about that another day. I've got another podcast on today, and then I'm headlining Finn Hall's fantastic Plot from the Blue tonight. So got to have 20 minutes of work prepared tonight. Yes, it's a busy day, but a good day. It's good to be productive. Now we're over to an area of the world I've not been to before. I've been near it, but never been in it. To the Bath area, and we've got a fantastic writer with us today. And I came across this young lady through Instagram. Actually, it just shows you sometimes when you're reading someone's work. And oh, I like this. I'll drop the young lady a message, and she'll come on today. We have the fantastic Emma Smith with us today. Now, Emma, obviously we've not met before, so you better tell us all. Give us the spiel, as I would say. Tell us about your where everything came from originally and where you're from, etc.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Andy. It's great to be here. So I grew up in Weston-super-Mare, actually, which is a small town outside of Bristol. Not a lot of people have heard of it. And it was fairly kind of derelict, really, when I was growing up. There wasn't a lot to really do. I think there was maybe like one actual proper restaurant, and the rest was sort of like fish and chip shops and seaside cafes and things like that. Um, but I grew up in a big family, so I'm one of five. I've got four brothers,
Well,
and
well, I say you don't have trouble with boyfriends growing up, then, did you?
well, that's another story.
We'll
Um,
leave that alone.
but but yeah, we rented, so we moved around a fair bit, and money was tight. So we often didn't have the things that my friends had. We got toys for Christmas and birthdays, but that was kind of it. And yeah, we had a like one of those TVs that was on a meter that you have to put a pound in the back to watch it, and often we'd run out
Oh,
coins, and my mum would have to break into it with a kitchen knife to try and get it to come back on. So that's one of the reasons why I started reading.
yeah, that's fair play. My wife's got a similar story about that, but if you ever talk to Amanda, my wife, she would tell you an almost identical story to that, but that's her story.
Really,
I,
I've never heard of anyone who had the TV meter other than me. Whenever I tell people, they're like, "What?"
Yeah, it was. I've heard of it, and it was very. I was like, I'm of the age where I can remember black and white TV, and it was like everybody in my street had like color TV, and my mum and dad took years to afford a sort of color TV, so I didn't see color TV till I was about 14. So
That's amazing.
let alone the video player, the first video player we had when I was 16, so it was like just shows you really. So
Yeah.
life is funny. So, but anyway, I know if you've dropped us a hint already, so you used to read a lot growing up. So,
Mhm.
so when did you first start getting interested in poetry then?
Oh wow. So I mean it's kind of always been a part of my life in some way. I suppose literature has just generally, my mum was a big reader and she's a published author now. So she's always kind of read to us from a young age. And I had a library card, and I remember, getting the letters in the post to tell me the books that had been reserved were free, and that was like the highlight of my life. So I've always been a big reader. I've always written journals since I was about 8 years old. So it's kind of always been a way of like understanding myself and the world, whether that was writing poems or, copying out song lyrics or writing stories and things like that. It's always been a bit of a guiding light for me. I definitely read a lot of poetry at school and throughout my degree when I studied English literature first time at uni. And one thing that I always loved was, analyzing the poems. So the questions you get in your exam of, find the poetic devices and what does it mean, and what's this imagery trying to portray. I always absolutely loved doing that, but I was never really, I suppose, confident enough to write my own poetry. It always felt like it was too difficult and too sort of elitist. I don't know. I felt a bit locked out of it, like it was something that I wasn't a good enough writer to ever really attempt. So long been an admirer of poetry, but I only really started writing it at the end of last year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting really that because I've been writing since I was about 10, but I didn't really start taking it serious till I got to what 29, 30, which I think you're a little bit older than that, but it's a simple sort of balance sometimes where sometimes it's the trauma of it. Something pushes you to do it. Because I was a massive fan of it. Like I used to have the collected works of a writer. I know you're a big fan of Sylvia Plath. When I got it when I was 17, that was my miserable goth days. But you do it's you can be a fan of it, but then it's like there's sometimes it needs a trigger, I think, doesn't it, really, where the work comes from. And I think that's what's happened with you here. But we'll come on to that in a bit because I want to ask you first of all before we do that. Obviously, I know you've got an MA in your writing as well. So how did this impact your writing at the time?
But the how did the MA impact my
Yeah.
writing? Yeah. Um, I think when I started the MA, I was a little bit older than I'd kind of planned because I first went to uni at 18, like most other people, and then I dropped out after a few years because I was having a lot of mental health struggles. What I didn't know at the time was obviously I'm autistic, but also I had bipolar disorder, which wasn't diagnosed until I was kind of well into my 20s. So at the time, I was really struggling with depressive episodes, and I didn't really understand kind of what was going on. So I dropped out after 2 years of my degree initially, and then after my son was born, so we're jumping around a little bit here, in my early 20s, I picked it back up again and I managed to finish it sort of part-time, which was amazing. And I loved every second of it. And I've always loved studying writing. And then I started my MA in 2019. So I can remember, getting that place and feeling like that year was going to be the absolute making of me and that it was going to kind of make me as a writer and I was going to get where I wanted to be. And at the time, I was writing prose, but I didn't really know what direction I wanted to take my writing in. I was sort of still trying to find myself, I think, as a writer and experimenting a lot. I wrote a lot of short stories, got some published, which was great, but I never really felt that I was on the right path. And then, of course, a few months into the MA, COVID happened, and we all sort of, I kind of developed this really great group of writing friends and peers and been workshopping a lot with them, which was just the most valuable thing for my writing, really, and kind of being immersed in that creative atmosphere. To have that like snatched away because of lockdown was actually, I think, quite detrimental to my writing. I think I really struggled with that and suddenly being cut off from what had been a bit of a life source for me. And then we kept up a lot of the workshops on Zoom and things like that, but it wasn't quite the same. So yeah, I think I that kind of stalled my progress a little bit, and then I struggled to get back to finding what it was. I was still writing, every day if it was in my notes app on my phone or bits and pieces here and there, but I just couldn't find that kind of through line um, to sustain that creativity. I kept sort of starting new projects and dropping things and just getting frustrated, really.
Yeah, no, I get completely with it. It took me like my first book came out when I was 39. So like it is, and I've got probably half a dozen unfinished, unrealized poetry books knocking around the archives, which are terrible. But you do it's I think sometimes it's when you get your first project, big project done, it's a boost to your system. It makes you realize I can do this, I will do this. I think it's important for people to realize your change as a writer, of what I can understand, happened at the beginning of this year, didn't it, really? When you
Yeah.
had, where's, I'm going to let you say the story, but obviously when you had a lot of problems, I think that's when it seemed to click for you, hasn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, after my MA sort of ended kind of anticlimactically on Zoom because of lockdown, um, all of my sort of writer friends went their separate ways and started their careers, and lots of them went on to, win prizes and publish books and did really well. And I was just a bit lost. And I think me and my son's father split up in lockdown as well. So I was then sort of a single parent having to make money. That was the main kind of impulse that doesn't really kind of blend too well with writing poetry or any other kind of writing, really. So I ended up going into marketing full time. And again, at the time, I knew that I had bipolar disorder, but I was taking medication for that and it was quite well managed. But I didn't really understand why I was struggling so much in other ways in my
Yeah.
life. And I couldn't really articulate what those struggles were, even. I think it was only when because my first marketing job was remote, so I could do it from home and I managed it quite easily. And then at the start of 2023, I was made redundant from that job, and then I had to quickly find another job. And I ended up going into a marketing manager role and working in an office, which I kind of knew would be difficult for me, but I didn't really anticipate quite how difficult it was. Um, and that's when I think all of my autistic traits kind of came to the fore, I suppose. Before that, I'd been working remotely at home. I'd been able to manage my environment quite well, but all of a sudden, I was in an environment where there was a lot of sensory overload, a lot of noise, a lot of things going on, bright lights, a lot of like corporate rules of engagement that I didn't understand. And it, I think over the course of a year, sort of fell apart quite dramatically. Um, because I was discovering, through kind of doing research into the struggles I was having with all of this like sensory overload and the communication differences between me and my colleagues that, I might actually be autistic, which is something I'd never considered before. When I was growing up, it was like autism was really only diagnosed in, little boys. And it was often that they were non-verbal or they had a really intense interest in something like maths or trains or dinosaurs. And it wasn't really talked about in young girls. And when I started to look into the traits of autism in girls and women, I realized it was exactly me and my experience. I'd been very quiet in school. I'd kind of got my head down and tried very hard at everything I did. I was always a pleasure to have in class. And um, I just didn't really understand um that all of these things were quite common experiences. Um, and then, being in this job where I was surrounded by people who, for the most part were neurotypical and had kind of neurotypical expectations of me. I was able to mask for a while because I'd been masking for my whole life, really. I'd not really understanding why I was different, but I knew that I was, and I knew that I struggled where other people didn't. Um, so just like for the first few months, I was able to do my kind of people pleasing thing of, over delivering and being the best that I could possibly be at my job and making everybody love me. But then it's really hard to sustain that mask over a long period of time. And it just started to drop. And then I started to get into trouble for things like,
Oh.
you know, telling the truth
Yeah.
and not kind of understanding, you know, hierarchies and things like that. There was a lot of stuff I think in those kind of jobs where you're supposed to read between the lines, and as an autistic person, that's not something that I can do. That's not really a language that I speak. I've always been told that I'm quite direct and honest, but that's the only way that I know how to communicate. I don't have like any other mode available to me.
Yeah, same man.
Um,
Same here. Could be with dyspraxic in my case. You do it's you like it's sometimes like I think some employers want you to come in and just jump straight in. I've picked everything up in about a week, and I'm not like that. Never have been. So yeah, I can believe you
no,
with
and
that.
I
So
actually, yeah, I think a bigger portion of the population than we realize are like, are neurodivergent and don't kind of fit into that typical um mold that we expect people to in the workplace. And I think that there is a lot of work to be done in that regard in terms of making workplaces of all kinds, more accessible and more accommodating of people with, differently wired brains, because it makes the work environment very hostile.
yeah,
And
yeah, I agree.
ultimately, I look back on my working life and realize that in pretty much every job I've had, I've followed the same pattern where I've burned out pretty spectacularly and had to quit. So that's what happened there, and I, you know, got to a point where I couldn't. I was being sort of spoken to in ways that I felt were discriminatory and made to feel like I was doing something wrong, where actually, that I didn't think that I was, and I think that can really erode your sense of self and self-esteem. And I felt a bit lost, I suppose. And I got to this point where I was like, I'm 33. I don't want to do this I don't want this to be my life. And actually, I don't think I can physically do it. Like I'm burning out and I can't continue. Um, so I ended up having to go on extended sick leave from that job at the end of last year. And it was at the point really for me where it wasn't really a choice. Like I'd hit such a level of burnout that I could barely speak. I couldn't get out of bed. I was really seeing the effects of masking for so long and actually what that does to someone who is neurodivergent. Um, and it can be really dangerous. Like it can make people feel suicidal. It can cause people to be really depressed. It can stop you from being able to function normally, and do things that you need to do to take care of yourself. So yeah, it was one of those times where your body and your brain just stops you in your tracks and it's like you need to pause here. Um
Yeah, understandable, and I agree with you
and
completely. So it was round about this point, wasn't it, when your poetry started to come out for yourself, and really, wasn't it?
um, yeah, so I had this um I had this idea. I'd seen something online that was it was a BBC course, and it was presented by Carol Ann Duffy, whose poetry I always really loved reading in school. And it was a kind of poetry masterclass thing. And I had some Christmas money, and it was like half price in the new year or something. And I was like, you know what? I reckon I could write poetry. I'm good at writing prose. I love reading poetry. I love music. I love song lyrics. I think that I could do this. And actually I got to a point where the feeling of like, oh, I might not be good enough, or, you know, people might not like it. I was just like, you know what? I just don't think I care anymore. I think I've got to try it. And so I did that. And, during this time where I was off work and I was really struggling in lots of ways, it just was something that really carried me through doing that course and reading poetry and writing my own. And everything I'd read up about autistic burnout had said that, as well as rest and, going out into nature and having that kind of meditative rest, creative rest is also a really big part of the recovery process. So being able to be creative is actually really good for neurodivergent brains. It's a really good outlet and it's really helpful in the process of recovery from autistic burnout. So I kind of gave up on trying to write like good poetry, and I just started writing everything that came into my head. I started, painting and writing and drawing and, creating these kind of sketchbooks that were, part poetry, part kind of illustration and painting and collage and all kinds of things, really, just trying to be creative and use that as a way to sort of heal myself. And, the more I sort of went out and had these long walks in nature, the more ideas would come to me. And the more poetry I read, the more inspired I became to, keep writing. And yeah, it was just something that was a huge, a hugely positive outlet for me. And, really started to help my self-esteem when I was writing things and, being happy with how they turned out.
Yeah, I think I get you completely. Sometimes you need that break. I think that's the point we're trying to raise with this. Sometimes it pushes you, doesn't it? And I noticed obviously when you've called it a term of like you almost you're unmasking yourself really with this, haven't you? This process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think these people that's a crunch point. People to understand that. I think it's the unmasking. It's like it's like almost like you're unburdening yourself, aren't you? Or just showing
Yeah,
people this is who I am really for the first time, and it's really well done. Your pieces in your Instagram page have been nakedly honest and have been brutally brilliant. So
thank
now
you.
obviously that's it for. I've just asked you the next question indirectly now about Instagram.
Yeah.
What made you want to start sharing your work with the world?
Oh, it was really scary. I think that I've always had that impulse to share and to try and communicate and connect with people through my writing. And I think part of that is because I often struggle to connect with people authentically in real life. I find it quite hard to manage friendships and relationships, as I think a lot of autistic people do. And often because, my autism is such that I get really burned out by social interaction. Um, Writing is a way that I can sort of connect with people that doesn't have that effect on me and doesn't drain my energy. So I ummed and ahed about starting the Instagram page for a while because I had a lot of reservations about putting myself out there in such a vulnerable way and kind of opening up my work for, other people to see and read. And, I wasn't sure if they would like it. I wasn't sure if it was good, but I got to a point where I think the need to express myself and to have that connection with the kind of creative world and with other writers and poets it just kind of overtook any of that self-consciousness that I was feeling. Um, and to the point of, what you said about unmasking, I think poetry's been like the one sort of creative outlet for me where I felt like I've been able to bring like every part of my personality and myself to it, and even things that I've been sort of ashamed of in the past, or I've wanted to hide, or I felt were a bit cringe, or I felt were a bit kind of, you know, oh, maybe I shouldn't like that thing. I've been able to kind of bring that into it in a way that feels really authentic to me. And yeah, I think I just was like, I'm gonna put this out there. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, it doesn't really matter to me at this point. I just want to be out there and be among other poets in the kind of Instagram scene. And yeah, I needed to nourish that part of myself, and Instagram has really done that for me. It's been amazing. It's been so nice to put poems out there and have people read them and respond and like them and say that they've connected with my words. That's all I've really ever wanted from writing, I think.
You can't ask for anything more sometimes with that. No, I agree with you completely. It's started off me that really well. I'm of the Facebook age where it started on Facebook really, yeah. But I know what you mean with that. It's the same thing really. So it is. One thing I tend to find in my case, if I started off being a poet, it kind of snowballed. And I think it's the same for you as well, where it takes you off in all kinds of directions. You don't even know where it's going to go sometimes yet. And it's really quite surprising where it can actually lead you sometimes. Like, I know you've been telling me you have done a couple of readings as well, haven't you? So how has that been for you? Like I call it reading your truths out to people then.
I love that. It sounds so much nicer than performing, which just
Yeah.
feels like it brings so much pressure to having to read work out. Yeah, I've performed a bit in sort of open mic nights in Bath, really, and locally. And it doesn't come naturally to me, to be honest. I think I'm much more of a page poet than a performance poet. I've met some incredible performance poets while I've been, doing open mics and reading my work out, and being part of that community and going to those nights and meeting other poets and hearing their work is amazing. And I think, every poet should do it, regardless of whether or not they feel that, naturally they're a performance poet or not. But also, I think there is a performance element to any kind of poetry, really, or any kind of writing. Poetry was designed to be sort of delivered and read out. And I think that any writer who wants to publish their work will have to read out their work at some point. So it's really, really good to practice that and to, learn the skills. But like I said, I think because I'm quite an introverted person and a shy person, actually, I do find it quite uncomfortable to stand on stage and speak to people. And not only speak to people, but speak to people in a way that, I'm sort of bearing my soul really sometimes with my work, because my poetry is quite confessional, as you said, and it's quite vulnerable. That can feel really scary. But then it's also really lovely when people, you know, uh, make noises at the right times in your poems, and you can tell that they're enjoying it and they're clapping you afterwards. It's a really lovely feeling.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely with that. It does. It's And have you found any of seeing the ones you've been to? Because I know, like I said, I don't do as much as I used to nowadays. Certainly, when stretch of thought, hearing other people's work sometimes can make you look at things in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's certainly influenced my work. I know my wife, Amanda, says that straight away because she's a novelist and poet herself, and very, very good one as well. But like she said it straight away, she's heard people like, I remember, and I'm not naming names here, somebody that actually came on stage, read a piece out about losing the grandmum recently.
Mm.
It was some years ago, it was, and she just come to terms with the death of her father. She wasn't. That direction, that piece made her think, so, yes, this is going to help me out with my work and stuff like that. And it does, it can be, you don't know what you're going to get sometimes, I think, do you? So,
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I definitely find those nights really inspiring, and hearing other people's work and the themes that they explore in their work as well has definitely influenced me. I think I recently went to watch a local poet called Josie Alford. She was headlining an open mic called Chimes in Bath, which I go to quite regularly. And I know Josie, we've kind of workshopped together a little bit and written some poetry together. And hearing her set, she talks about the death of her father and how her and her father didn't have the best relationship when he was alive, and how complicated that grief is. And I had the same experience. My dad left when I was 8 years old, and I didn't see him again until I was in my early 20s, and we never really had a relationship. And then he died in 2020 during lockdown. So that was really kind of helpful for me. I think actually when I watched her set, I went home and I wrote a poem about, my dad dying, and how that felt for me when actually my life had been sort of mostly shaped by his absence rather than his presence, as it should be with a parent. So yeah, I definitely hear you there.
yeah, no, it's understandable with that. Now, like I said before to you, obviously, we plan everything else to spoken label. That's why, particularly, I want to make sure I'm going to tell certain things out to us now. Like I said, I know you've got into being a poetry reader now, haven't you, for Variant Lit? So I want to learn about first 2 points of this one is how did you get in contact with this magazine, and what's made you
Mm.
want to move in this direction also?
Sorry, just taking a sip of water. Um, yes, so I think it was maybe in the spring or summer of this year. I've been following Variant Lit for a while on Instagram, and I think that's a really good thing for aspiring poets to do, is just to follow, as many lit mags and journals and things as possible. And especially when, you're reading their work and you think, oh, I really resonate with the kind of work that they publish. So I was a big fan of Variant Literature. I really admired a lot of the poetry that they published on, on the online, and they have an online magazine. But they also publish books as well. So I had a few of their chapbooks and things from their poetry authors. And they put out an open call for readers for their next submission period. So, if I wasn't on Instagram, I wouldn't have seen that, but I did, and I applied, and I just told them a bit about myself and my background and my work as a writer. And yeah, I started working with them, and it was great. I mean, it was during a time where I was still off sick from work, so I had a lot of spare time, and I wanted to do some kind of voluntary work that was related to poetry, because I wanted the experience, and I wanted to be around other poets and poetry editors. So doing that, they're mostly based in the States, so communicating online and things like that. But working with them, I've just read for their most recent submission period, and seeing that kind of come to fruition and the pieces that were chosen was just massively beneficial to me. Reading all kinds of diverse work from different poets and, helping within the team to decide which ones were appropriate for publication it was so helpful in terms of informing my own work actually about, where I can improve with my own poetry, which pieces of mine, I should try to publish and which ones maybe need to just go in the bottom drawer for now.
Never to,
Um,
some cases, never to be seen again. I always think.
exactly. Some poems are just for me. Um, but it's been great. And yeah, I'm really hoping to continue working with them. I've just done a bit of work for their social media as well. So yeah, that's been really great. It's just been nice to be immersed in that scene and to be able to read such a high standard of submissions, because they do get some incredible submissions and not all of them make it through. So
I agree. Yeah, I've worked in magazines before. Sometimes it's like when you're reading stuff and you're sat there thinking that needs to go in, and then was you realise it can't go in, you feel absolutely really cruel, and it's like, yeah, I've done that myself before now. It's horrible.
yeah, absolutely. But also, I think it helped me because I do submit as much as I can to, lit mags and zines and stuff myself. It really helped me to see that actually often when you get rejected, it's not necessarily to do with the quality of your work, but just, how well it fits that particular magazine, how well it fits maybe the theme of the issue, or whether they've got another similar, poem going out in the same issue or something like that. Um, it doesn't always mean that there's something wrong with your work. It just might not be the right fit at the right time. So it really helped me to see that too, actually, how difficult that process of finding those poems that are going to be published can be. And seeing such high quality work sort of still getting rejected was quite it was quite comforting to me in a way, even though, yeah, like you say, you feel bad. You want to say yes to everyone.
Yeah, true. Now, obviously, in relation to yourself or your creativity, then, where do you envisage? I'll use a big word in now. Envisage. Where do you envisage your creativity leading you next?
So my goal is, my first goal, I really want to publish a poetry book. So that, it could well be that I go straight into a first collection, or I, publish a chapbook or a couple of chapbooks, before I get to that point. But that's kind of my next sort of big goal that's in sight. So, but I also feel like, the next year or so for me is going to be trying to write and hone some of my existing poems and trying to find enough work that fits, a particular sort of theme or idea for that book. Because so far I've really written across like quite a broad spectrum of things. And although I think there are themes throughout my poems and they are all quite similar in tone, um, I want to really kind of hone down on a few things and find enough work that has, like a coherent narrative thread really for a collection. So that's my goal. I would absolutely love to have a poetry book published and have other people buy it and read it. But I'm currently studying a course with the Poetry School, which is all about form, poetic form, and that was something for me that I really wanted to spend more time on, because I find, traditional poetic forms quite scary, and I tend to write in um, either sort of free verse or prose poems and things like that. And I wanted to try and branch out and challenge myself. So I've been doing that, and I've been coming up with some great material in that course that I'm really looking forward to sharing. So, sharing more on my Instagram, trying to build my following. And also I've got plans to start a newsletter in the new year as well, which will be about neurodivergence and creativity. So I really want to talk about, the relationship between writing and all forms of creativity really, and neurodivergence, and the challenges and the benefits and all that sort of thing.
Good luck. Good luck. That's a great platform to do that straight away with it. So, yeah, wish you all the best on that straight away. Give me a nudge if you want me to write anything for you. So I've got plenty to say about that.
Amazing.
What perks with me is like I'm always doing columns all the time from various bits and pieces. I've got plenty, I can say. So let's leave it at that for the moment. So,
Fantastic.
but anyway, we'll talk about that off mic. So, yeah, now obviously, last bit of part one is obviously social media. Where can people find you?
So I only really post my poems to Instagram, and my Instagram handle is at EMZ Marie Marie poems. So you can find all of my poems there. I've been, posting as much as I can, and I'll post new work whenever I can there, as well as sort of updates and what I've been up to. And it's just a really lovely space. I've met some great people on sort of the poetry side of Instagram, yourself included, obviously. And
Of course.
it's yeah, I definitely recommend it for poets and anyone who wants to share their writing. I think it's a really good platform to do that, and I'm really glad that I, started at my page.
Yeah, me too as well. So otherwise we wouldn't have talked today. So brilliant. Now we'll wrap up part one here, folks. Anyway, let Emma go get herself composed, and we will with that two shakes of the dice when Emma's going to read out a couple of poems for us. Thank you again, Emma. It's been a great part one. This.
Thank you.
See you in 2 minutes.